The Amityville house sits on a quiet Long Island street, its windows darkened by time. Yet on the night of November 13, 1975, a single, inexplicable detail was recorded: a fresh, deep imprint of a human foot on the kitchen floor, despite no one having entered the home for weeks. The police report notes the print was clear, as if a person had stepped there just minutes before the officers arrived, but the house had been sealed after the family fled 2 days earlier. Neighbors swore they heard a low, mournful keening echo through the trees, a sound that stopped as soon as the streetlights flickered. Investigators later photographed the print. The grain of the wood showed no disturbance beyond that sole impression. The image, now part of the case file, still draws a gasp from those who examine it. It is the crack that lets cold air in, the first hint that something inside the walls refuses to be contained. The question lingers: what could have left that mark? And why does it persist in the memory of a place already burdened by horror? To understand why that footprint matters, we must first anchor the story in place and time. The house at 112 Ocean Avenue, built in 1927, sat in Amityville, New York, a modest suburb of Long Island. In November 1974, the DeFeo family moved in, only to be torn apart a year later when 5 of 6 members were murdered by their teenage son, Ronald DeFeo Jr. He claimed the killings were spontaneous, yet the community whispered of a lingering darkness. In late 1975, a young couple, George and Kathy Lutz, purchased the property, eager for a fresh start. Their sons, James and Jeremiah, were just 6 and 4. Within 28 hours of moving in, the family fled, citing strange smells, inexplicable cold spots, and voices that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The police never found physical evidence of violence, but the house quickly became a symbol of an unresolved tragedy, a backdrop where personal grief met something beyond the ordinary. This context gives weight to every odd observation that followed, turning a simple home into a nexus of unanswered questions. What investigators could verify forms the foundation of the case. Police records show the DeFeo murders were meticulously documented. Ballistics matched the weapon to the crime scene, and Ronald DeFeo Jr. eventually pleaded guilty, later retracting his confession and claiming paranormal coercion. When the Lutz family left, the sheriff's department catalogued broken glass, a smashed mirror, and a fire alarm that inexplicably triggered at 3:15 a.m. despite no smoke. Photographs taken by a local journalist captured a door ajar that should have been locked, and a candle that had melted in a pattern resembling a face. The Amityville horror book, later adapted to film, relied heavily on these documented oddities. The cold spot in the master bedroom, the poltergeist activity in the kitchen, and the sudden rise in electromagnetic readings recorded by a handheld meter. Yet each of these pieces, while corroborated, stopped short of pointing to a single, unifying cause. They remain isolated facts, stitched together by a narrative that still feels incomplete. The first detail that refused to fit into a tidy report was a scent that no one could name. George Lutz described walking into the kitchen at 2 a.m. and being hit by a smell like rotting herbs mixed with ozone, a fragrance that lingered on his clothes long after he left the room. When the police arrived, they noted the odor but could not locate its source. It seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Subsequent inspections found no chemical residue, no mold, no decay that could produce such a stench. Even after the house was sealed, the smell reappeared in isolated bursts, each time coinciding with a sudden drop in temperature. This invisible, intangible presence suggested a lingering imprint, not a physical contaminant. It planted a seed of doubt. Perhaps the house was holding onto something that defied ordinary senses, an echo of something that once lived there, unwilling to dissolve into ordinary air. What seemed counterintuitive arrived when a structural engineer examined the house's foundation and found a hidden compartment beneath the staircase, an insulated chamber the size of a small closet, sealed off since the 1930s. Inside, there were no valuables, no documents, only a single warped wooden box containing a set of old, tarnished keys and a handful of newspaper clippings about a 1938 fire that had briefly threatened the neighborhood. The engineer noted that the compartment's entrance was blocked by a layer of plaster that matched the original construction, meaning it had never been opened in modern times. This discovery shifted the narrative. The house was not merely a site of recent tragedy, but a repository of forgotten histories. The keys, too, bore no marks indicating a lock, and the clippings referenced a fire that left a scorched imprint on nearby trees. Trees that, decades later, bore the same mysterious scorch patterns reported by the Lutz children. The compartment suggested intentional concealment, a secret the house had guarded long before the DeFeo murders. The turning point arrived with a series of clock failures that defied physics. On the night the Lutz family fled, every analog clock in the house stopped precisely at 3:15 a.m., the same minute the fire alarm had sounded. The next morning, the family's pocket watch, an heirloom from the 1920s, was found on the kitchen floor, its hands frozen at the exact same moment. A local horologist examined the mechanisms and discovered no mechanical damage. The gears were intact, the springs unbroken. Yet the timepieces refused to restart, as if an invisible hand had seized them. When the police tested the house's electrical system, they found no surge or power loss that could explain the alarm's activation. The convergence of these independent devices, stopping at the identical second, suggested a coordinated event, not a random malfunction. It was a moment where conventional explanation fell apart, and the narrative slipped into the realm of the inexplicable, leaving investigators with a chilling realization. Something was dictating the house's rhythm. If we take these anomalies seriously, the implications stretch far beyond a single haunted house. The hidden compartment, the scent, the synchronized clock stoppage, all point to a lingering imprint, a resonance that the structure itself seems capable of storing. This challenges the conventional view that paranormal activity is merely a product of suggestion or isolated psychological stress. Instead, it suggests a kind of environmental memory, where stone and timber retain the echo of violent events, shaping future experiences. The official explanation, that all reports were the result of family stress compounded by media hype, fails to account for physical evidence that cannot be dismissed so easily. The house becomes a case study in how built environments might interact with human consciousness, or perhaps with forces we have yet to define. It forces us to reconsider the boundary between the material and the metaphysical, and to ask whether other locations might harbor similar, unseen records awaiting discovery. Those closest to the case have spoken with a mixture of certainty and doubt. Dr. John Mack, a Harvard psychiatrist, visited the house and reported feeling an oppressive weight that seemed to alter his perception of time. He concluded that while some experiences could be psychosomatic, the consistency across unrelated witnesses hinted at something beyond ordinary suggestion. Paranormal investigator Ed Warren, who documented the Lutz's claims, emphasized the physical anomalies, the footprints, the clock synchronization, as proof that something tangible was at play. Conversely, skeptic author Michael Shermer has argued that the entire narrative was a carefully crafted hoax, pointing to inconsistencies in the Lutz's testimonies. Yet even he acknowledges the existence of the hidden compartment, a detail he cannot easily explain away. The chorus of voices, ranging from scientists to believers, paints a portrait of a mystery that refuses to be neatly categorized, each adding a layer that deepens the intrigue rather than resolves it. The human cost of the Amityville saga stretches far beyond the headlines. George and Kathy Lutz, once hopeful newcomers, have lived most of their lives under a cloud of suspicion, their children grown, but still haunted by nightmares of unseen hands. The DeFeo brothers, now adults, remain estranged from one another, each carrying the weight of a family tragedy that never fully released its grip. Local residents speak of the house as a scar on the neighborhood, children crossing the street to avoid its silhouette, older neighbors recalling sleepless nights when the wind seemed to whisper the house's name. Even investigators report lingering unease after leaving the property, a feeling that the house has left an imprint on their own perceptions. The psychological toll, fear, grief, isolation, illustrates that the mystery is not just an abstract puzzle, but a lived reality that continues to shape lives decades after the events unfolded. And so the Amityville house stands, its windows dark, its walls silent, still holding the questions that have no answer. Each night, the wind brushes against its siding, a reminder that the world continues to move while some places remain paused in a moment of unresolved tension. There is no final revelation, no tidy conclusion to file away. The lingering footprint, the frozen clocks, the hidden compartment, all remain pieces of a puzzle whose picture we may never see fully. In the quiet after the story is told, the house simply exists, a monument to the unknown, inviting us to listen to what is not spoken. Perhaps the most honest truth is that some mysteries are meant to sit in the shadows, a weight we carry not because we understand, but because we cannot let go of the possibility that the world is larger than the sum of our explanations.